It started with just one sentence. A quiet, almost throwaway line from Ed Sheeran that sent Hollywood into absolute chaos. During what seemed like a casual interview, the soft-spoken singer leaned back, smiled faintly, and said, "Sometimes the truth hurts more than betrayal." Those 9 words were all it took to flip the internet upside down. Because the timing couldn't have been more suspicious. Just days earlier, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban had announced their shocking divorce after nearly 2 decades together. No drama, no statement, just silence. And suddenly, here was Ed, their close friend, tourmate, and longtime confidant, speaking in riddles that felt a little too real. Fans didn't hear a lyric, they heard a confession. Social media exploded overnight. Was Ed talking about Keith? Did he just confirm Nicole cheated? What truth is he hinting at? Theories spread like wildfire, and that one line turned from a poetic quote into a possible clue behind one of Hollywood's quietest and most heartbreaking splits. Because this wasn't just Ed Sheeran, the humble songwriter we all know. This was Ed, the man who'd spent years beside Keith, backstage, on tour, in private moments only friends get to see. He wasn't an outsider guessing from afar. He was inside the story. And that's what made his words hit harder than any tabloid headline. Was Ed Sheeran defending a broken friend, or accidentally exposing a painful secret that Keith never wanted out? One thing's for sure, that single sentence didn't just shake Hollywood. It shattered the illusion of the perfect marriage everyone thought they knew. And as fans started connecting dots, it became clear this wasn't just a breakup. This was the unraveling of a love story written in silence, and Ed Sheeran may have just whispered the truth no one was supposed to hear. But before we can understand the storm his words caused, we need to go back to where this story began, the fairy tale that once made everyone believe in forever. Before the headlines, before the whispers, there was a love story straight out of a dream. It was 2006, the golden summer, when Nicole Kidman, fresh off her Oscar win and stepping out of the shadow of her past, met Keith Urban, the country boy from Australia who had just conquered Nashville. 2 worlds collided: Hollywood royalty and a soulful musician with a voice that carried heartbreak and hope in equal measure. Their chemistry was instant. Within months, they were inseparable. The world fell in love with their love-elegant red carpet appearances, shy smiles, stolen glances. It was everything fans wanted from a romance between a movie queen and a country king. But behind the glitz, there was something deeper, something raw and real. Because just months after their wedding in Sydney, Keith checked himself into rehab. The perfect fairy tale cracked before it could even begin. The world held its breath, expecting the usual Hollywood ending: a quiet separation, a polite statement, another love story gone cold. But Nicole didn't run. She didn't hide. She stood by him. No cameras, no press, just loyalty, fierce and quiet. And that's what made everyone believe this love was different. They came out stronger. Over the years, they built a life that felt almost untouchable. 2 beautiful daughters, Sunday and Faith. Family trips away from the spotlight, where Nicole swapped gowns for jeans and Keith traded stages for strollers. Every photo, every interview, painted the same picture: 2 opposites who somehow made it work. Keith once called Nicole his anchor. Nicole called Keith her miracle. And when he took the stage at her 2024 AFI Lifetime Achievement Award, choking back tears as he said she was the calm in his chaos, it felt like the kind of love you only see in movies. The crowd stood in silence, watching a man so proud, so in love, that even the harshest cynics believed in forever again. For nearly 20 years, they defied the odds. In an industry built on breakups and betrayal, they were the exception proof that love could survive fame, distance, and darkness. But even the strongest love can start to bend under the quiet weight of time. And while the world saw perfection, something inside that perfect picture was already starting to fade. Because fairy tales don't end with happily ever after in Hollywood. They end with silence, distance, and stories whispered in the dark. And as the years went on, those whispers started to grow louder. But what came next would shatter everything fans thought they knew about Nicole and Keith's unbreakable bond. Every love story that shines too brightly eventually shows its shadows, and for Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban, those shadows began to creep in slowly. At first, it was subtle. Fewer red carpet appearances together. Less laughter in interviews. Moments that once felt effortless began to look rehearsed. Fans noticed, even if the tabloids didn't. By 2024, something about their dynamic had changed. Keith was often seen alone in Nashville, pouring himself into studio sessions and late-night performances. Nicole, meanwhile, was spending months overseas, filming back-to-back projects in London and Paris. The distance that once made their love stronger now looked like a quiet escape. Insiders started whispering that they were living separate lives. Rumors hinted that Keith felt like a supporting character in Nicole's story, the devoted husband left behind while she chased roles that took her further away from home. And those whispers only grew louder when fans began to notice small, telling details. The missing wedding ring during a press junket. The uncomfortable glances at an awards show. The way Keith stopped thanking Nicole during his performances, a habit he'd never missed in nearly 2 decades. Still, they smiled for the cameras. They laughed when asked about their marriage. They gave the same answers, "We just make it work." But fans could feel the strain behind those words. Because when two people who built a life on love start performing that love, the act eventually cracks. Behind closed doors, reports claim they tried to fix it therapy, time apart, private getaways. But what once felt like devotion started to feel like distance. Keith's friends say he became quieter, more reflective, writing songs that felt heavier than usual. One lyric in particular caught fans' attention during an acoustic set in early 2025. "You can lose someone long before they're gone." People didn't know it yet. But that line was more than a lyric. It was a confession, a quiet warning that the fairy tale had already begun to fade. And while the world still believed in the image of Hollywood's most unbreakable couple, something behind the scenes was beginning to unravel piece by piece, moment by moment. Until, one morning, everything changed. Because the next headline wouldn't be about their love story, it would be about its end. It happened without warning. No public meltdown, no explosive headline, just a quiet legal document that sent shockwaves through Hollywood. In September 2025, Nicole Kidman filed for divorce from Keith Urban. 19 years of marriage, 2 children, countless red carpets, and not a single hint that anything was wrong until it was over. There was no statement, no heartfelt Instagram post, no press release asking for privacy during this difficult time. Just silence. And in that silence, fans felt something colder than heartbreak confusion. Because couples like Nicole and Keith didn't just end, they were supposed to be unbreakable. The details trickled out slowly, and that's when people realized something didn't add up. Nicole was granted 83% custody of their daughters, while Keith received just 17%. No argument, no legal battle. Keith didn't contest it. He simply signed, packed up quietly, and disappeared into the background. For a man known for fighting his demons with fire, his surrender was the loudest red flag of all. Friends close to the couple said it wasn't anger that broke him, it was exhaustion. The kind that doesn't come from fame or pressure, but from heartbreak too heavy to carry anymore. Some claimed he'd known it was coming. Others whispered that he'd already accepted something long before the divorce was even filed, something that had fractured the marriage from the inside out. Because when a man like Keith Urban, whose love once burned through every lyric, every stage, every interview, suddenly stops fighting, you know the pain runs deep. The industry reacted with disbelief. Directors, musicians, even fans online refused to believe the end was real. For almost 2 decades, Nicole and Keith had been the proof that Hollywood love could last. But now, that illusion was gone, replaced by a mystery that felt too quiet to be clean. Why no explanation? Why did Keith give up everything without a word? And what truth was he protecting by staying silent? That's when the whispers started turning into theories. Because behind the polished press silence, people in Nashville and London were starting to talk. And what they were saying would change everything. It began as a whisper, the kind that floats through the industry before it ever hits a headline. While Nicole Kidman was filming her latest project in London, sources claimed she had grown close to someone on set. A co-star, a producer, depending on who you asked, the details were fuzzy, but the energy behind the rumors was sharp. They weren't just working late, they were spending time. Long dinners, quiet car rides, the kind of connection that starts as friendship, but ends in something more dangerous. At first, no one wanted to believe it. Nicole and Keith were the blueprint of loyalty, the Hollywood marriage that survived rehab, distance, and fame. But soon, people started noticing the changes. Keith stopped visiting her on set. Nicole stopped mentioning him in interviews. And when fans spotted her in London without her wedding ring, the story started writing itself. Insiders whispered that Keith knew, that he'd found out about the emotional closeness, maybe more, but refused to explode publicly. He didn't chase revenge, he didn't leak stories or fight for sympathy. He simply went quiet. Friends say that's what broke everyone's hearts, not anger, but the silence that followed. Because when Keith Urban goes quiet, it means something's broken beyond repair. People who'd known him for years said he retreated into music, writing, recording, barely sleeping. Those who saw him in Nashville described a man trying to stay composed while carrying a weight too heavy for words. And yet, there was no confrontation. No accusations, no denials. Just a clean legal filing and two people pretending their story ended peacefully. But those who were closest to them said otherwise. They claimed Keith's dignity wasn't weakness, it was restraint. That instead of dragging Nicole through the mud, he chose silence as his revenge. Still, silence never lasts long in Hollywood. Because soon, someone else, someone who'd seen both sides, would accidentally say the one thing that turned quiet heartbreak into a global headline. And that someone was Ed Sheeran. He was never supposed to be part of the scandal. Ed Sheeran, the quiet red-haired troubadour whose biggest controversies usually involved guitar strings and chart positions, suddenly found himself standing in the middle of someone else's heartbreak. His connection to Keith Urban went back years. They weren't just colleagues, they were brothers in rhythm. Late-night jam sessions, world tours, songs written over whiskey, and heart-to-heart conversations about fame, fear, and love. Keith once said, Ed was one of the few people who understands the madness and still stays humble. So when Ed spoke, people knew it came from a place of trust, not gossip. Weeks after Nicole filed for divorce, Ed sat down for what was supposed to be a harmless interview about his new music. The questions were routine until the interviewer casually asked, "Have you talked to Keith lately?" Ed paused, smiled softly, and said the sentence that froze the internet. "Yeah, he's been holding on to something painful for a long time. Sometimes the truth hurts more than betrayal." 9 words. That's all it took to set Hollywood on fire. It didn't sound rehearsed. It didn't sound like a metaphor. It sounded like a man speaking from experience, maybe even guilt. And fans instantly knew. He wasn't talking about a song. Social media exploded within hours. Clips of the interview went viral on TikTok, Twitter, X, and Instagram. Number Keith's truth, number Ed knows, number Nicole and Keith, all trending. People played the video frame by frame, analyzing Ed's tone, his body language, even the tiny sigh before he spoke. They weren't just hearing words, they were hearing truth. Theories started swirling. Was Ed defending his friend, subtly calling out Nicole's betrayal without naming names? Was he hinting that Keith had discovered something devastating, something the world wasn't meant to know? Or was it just an emotional slip, an artist accidentally revealing too much. Ed's team tried to control the damage, saying the quote was taken out of context. But here's the thing, Ed never corrected it himself. He stayed silent. No apology, no clarification, nothing. And in a world where silence is never innocent, his quiet became its own kind of confirmation. Because if he'd said nothing wrong, why not deny it? For fans, it was the final clue, the missing puzzle piece that made everything else click. Nicole's absence, Keith's quiet retreat, the tension that had been building for months. It all came together with that one line. Ed Sheeran hadn't just spoken. He'd exposed something, intentionally or not, that everyone else was too afraid to say out loud. But what came next would turn his quiet confession into a full-blown Hollywood investigation. The moment Ed Sheeran's words hit the airwaves, the internet lost its mind. Fans didn't just listen, they investigated. Every corner of social media became a crime scene, and Ed's quote was the smoking gun. TikTok exploded first. Clips of his interview were slowed down, captioned, and analyzed frame by frame. Did he hesitate before saying truth? Did he glance off camera like he'd said too much? People swore they could see guilt in his eyes. Threads on Reddit dissected every syllable, while fan pages began pulling receipts past interviews, backstage photos, even old concert clips where Nicole and Keith appeared together with Ed in the background. Soon, hashtags flooded every platform. Number, Ed knows the truth. Number, Keith's pain. Number, Nicole and Keith divorce. Each one carried new evidence. A lyric from Keith's last album, a look Nicole gave on the red carpet, a quote from an old Ed Sheeran podcast. The internet was connecting dots, and the picture they were painting wasn't pretty. Some fans believed Ed was defending his friend, that he'd seen Keith's heartbreak up close and let it slip in a moment of compassion. Others claimed he was exposing Nicole, intentionally dropping a truth bomb without naming names. And then there were the wild theories, fans suggesting Ed might have witnessed something firsthand during the couple's private gatherings or tours. No one had proof, but everyone had conviction. Entertainment sites jumped on the frenzy, replaying the clip in every language, every headline twisting the knife deeper. Ed Sheeran reveals Keith Urban's hidden pain. Did Ed just confirm Nicole's betrayal? Each headline pulled millions of clicks, each video dissected like a secret message. Through it all, Ed said nothing. No clarification, no apology, just silence. And that silence made people dig even harder. Because when a celebrity doesn't deny a rumor that explosive, fans assume there's fire beneath the smoke. Meanwhile, Keith Urban went completely dark. No social media posts, no interviews, no public appearances. His silence combined with Ed's created an echo chamber that fans filled with theories, heartbreak, and speculation. And every hour, the story grew bigger. What started as a quiet comment became an online obsession. Because everyone wanted the same answer. What truth was Ed talking about, and who had betrayed whom? The internet didn't know it, but the next twist would only make the mystery deeper. Because while the world was busy decoding Ed's words, Keith Urban himself was about to send a message far louder than any interview ever could. A message made entirely of silence. While the internet tore itself apart with theories, Keith Urban vanished. No interviews, no sightings, no cryptic posts or emotional songs. Just a sudden total silence, the kind that doesn't feel peaceful, but haunted. For a man who'd spent decades pouring his heart into lyrics, Keith's decision to stop speaking entirely said more than any press release ever could. He wasn't defending himself. He wasn't denying anything. He simply disappeared. At first, fans thought he was taking time to heal, a quiet retreat to escape the noise. But then came the strange part. Industry insiders started whispering that Keith had turned down every major opportunity that came his way. No award shows, no collaborations, not even charity events he used to host religiously. It was as if he'd built a wall between himself and the world that once adored him. And yet, behind that silence, something else was happening. Musicians close to him said Keith was spending long nights in his private Nashville studio, writing songs that no one was allowed to hear, not even his label. One insider claimed the music was too raw, too personal, like reading someone's diary after they've been broken. Fans began to notice clues. Keith's old Instagram posts with Nicole quietly vanished. Tour merchandise disappeared from his website. His signature love songs, the ones inspired by her, were removed from live set lists. It wasn't bitterness. It was erasure. But silence has a power of its own. Every time he stayed quiet, the media got louder. Every time he ignored the rumors, they grew wilder. Until finally, his absence became its own form of statement, a message without words. People began to realize that maybe Keith wasn't hiding. Maybe he was protecting something, his daughters, his peace, or even the truth that everyone else was chasing. Because when a man who's built his career on emotion suddenly stops sharing it, it's not because he has nothing to say. It's because what he could say would change everything. And just when the world began to move on, thinking the story was fading, Keith Urban quietly dropped a new single. No promo, no interviews, no explanation. Just a midnight release titled The Quiet Kind. The lyrics? Raw, painful, and far too specific to be fiction. That's when everyone realized Keith's silence hadn't been empty. It had been loading. It dropped out of nowhere. No teasers, no countdown, no interviews. Just a single notification at midnight. Keith Urban, The Quiet Kind. Within minutes, the song was everywhere. Fans pressed play expecting heartbreak, but what they heard was something else entirely. It wasn't a love song. It wasn't even sad in the usual Keith Urban way. It was confessional, almost dangerously honest. The lyrics felt like pages ripped straight from a private journal. Lines like, "You kissed me goodbye before London knew why. Truth don't cheat, but silence lies." And the one that made everyone's jaw drop. He told me pain ain't poison till it sings in your friend's voice. It didn't take long for fans to connect the dots. London, silence, friend's voice. Was he referencing the alleged affair? Was friend a subtle nod to Ed Sheeran, the man whose words ignited the scandal weeks earlier? The speculation was instant and explosive. Comment sections turned into investigations, every lyric dissected for hidden meaning. Twitter X flooded with theories that The Quiet Kind was Keith's veiled response to Nicole, or maybe even a message to Ed himself. One fan wrote, "This isn't a song, it's a confession wrapped in melody." But what really sent chills through listeners wasn't what Keith said it was, what he didn't. The entire second verse hinted at betrayal, but stopped just before naming anyone. It was restraint drenched in heartbreak, like a man standing on the edge of truth, refusing to jump. Music critics called it the most personal song of his career. Others called it a quiet revenge. Within hours, it hit #1 on iTunes in multiple countries. But Keith still didn't say a word. No press tour, no follow-up tweet. Just the song and silence. That silence, paired with the lyrics, said everything. It wasn't about bitterness or blame. It was about closure, the kind that doesn't come from apology or justice, but from finally letting go. And yet, the final line of the song left everyone unsettled. Because Keith sang it in a whisper, almost like he didn't want the world to hear. "She'll never know the truth I kept." Fans froze. What truth? Was it forgiveness or something darker? The song didn't answer the question. It created one, the kind that lingers long after the music stops. And that's when people realized Keith Urban hadn't just broken his silence. He'd ended the story his own way, not with a statement, but with a secret. When Ed Sheeran said, "Sometimes the truth hurts more than betrayal," no one imagined those 8 words would echo through Hollywood like a thunderclap. But they did. And in the weeks that followed, they stopped being just a quote. They became a mirror. A mirror reflecting everything that had been hidden behind the perfect smiles, the polished interviews, and the love story everyone thought they understood. That single line cracked open the illusion. It reminded the world that even in the glittering glow of fame, heartbreak still bleeds quietly. It exposed the truth that love stories don't always end with villains and victims. Sometimes, they just end because holding on hurts more than letting go. Keith Urban's silence became a symphony of its own, one of strength, restraint, and pain. Only he and a few others will ever fully understand. And Ed's words? They were never meant to be an exposé. They were the accidental confession of a friend who'd seen too much and said too little for too long.